I am so excited to be doing the first live, which is solely run on the Brain Bristle handle for Autism Awareness, known as AutiNL. I'm hoping this works and she can find us. All right. Yay, we found you. Amazing.
I wonder
Hi,
why
hi, hi,
the
hi.
camera's turned. Hold on one second.
No
The
worries.
camera's turned. There we go.
Oh,
Hi.
hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
We're good. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for doing this. This is just huge for Brain Bristle and for everybody who's going to watch this. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Happy Autism Awareness
Autism
Acceptance Month.
Awareness Acceptance Month. This is just like the perfect virtual kickoff for us. We've been doing a lot of in-person things, but this is so great to kick off our month virtually. So thank you so much. I've already shared in our newsletter, over Instagram, and over LinkedIn about, a little bit about you. But I'd love for you to just kind of like start us off with talking about, you and your journey, the work that you do, your writing career, whatever. Start with.
Sure. So I'm Lauren Melissa. I'm also known as AutiNL. And I guess I'm considered an autistic self-advocate content creator,
I love
but
it.
I'm also an author, and I also work in autism inclusion in my day-to-day work.
That's amazing.
And so I've been working in autism self-advocacy content creation online since 2016, and the whole landscape has changed in 9 years. I'll say that for sure. But in general, I just feel really passionately about working alongside the autistic community to co-create a world that authentically includes us. And I also really feel passionately about sharing positive or neutral coping skills and strategies for autistic individuals, because I feel like sometimes we're given tools, but the tools don't actually work for us, they work for others. And so I like to work alongside the community to talk about coping strategies and a not really fully inclusive worlds that actually do work for autistic folks. And I would say that I was like kind of inspired to start this work because I was, feeling as though there wasn't a lot of dialogue back in 2016 from autistics to autistic folks online.
Yeah.
And now there's so much, though. A lot has really changed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I studied autism back in 2009, and I've been in the field since 2007. So back then, there was nobody like you that we knew. So when I worked with high functioning autistic kids, I just wasn't sure where their journeys would go and what would happen every day. It was like a science experiment. Every day was a trial and error. I'm like, let's try you writing, and let's try you math, and let's try you running or swimming or whatever else. So it's really, really so great that there's so many autistic self-advocates today, because it just like when we're working with schools, it just gives us a sense of direction and a sense of ambition. So that's always really, really helpful. So Lauren, can you talk a little bit more about the work that you do with, like, do you work with a school or with an organization with inclusion and autism?
I don't necessarily like to combine my work, the organizations I work with offline with my platform online, just for privacy reasons. But I do tend to work with schools in autism inclusion, and that's probably, the education field is probably my primary realm outside of content creation, where I support autism inclusion.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So talk a little bit about, your journey becoming a self-advocate. What kind of like nudged you into that, and your journey being a writer? I'm also a writer. So I'm always, and I read a lot of autistic writers, and their writing is beautiful. And I'm always wondering, how's Lauren, or how's Matt Haig, or how's Hannah Gatsby different from me, who's a neurotypical? So I'm just curious to hear about your journey with self-advocacy and being a writer on the spectrum.
So I definitely, well, that's really, first off, awesome that you're also a writer. But I think that I like exist in two different writing spheres. So I write online, I write on my Instagram, I write
Right,
these posts and informational pieces, but then I
right,
also write
right,
fiction, primarily young adult fiction with neurodivergent protagonists. And I would say that those two spheres are very different parts of me, actually.
right.
So the informational writing, the nonfiction writing that I do online, my primary inspiration from that comes from lived experience, but also arenas where I see like community discourse. So I try to like take a look at what the autistic communities around the country, my country, and also around the world are saying, and contribute my lived experience to those conversations in a neutral to positive way.
Right, right, right.
And that for me is very cathartic. And I started that work because of my diagnosis and how I learned that my diagnosis had been underdiagnosed and missed for so long because of just a lack of understanding of autistic lived experience versus the superficial surface level that non-autistic people see.
Right.
But then fiction wise, I have always been writing fiction. It's one of my favorite things to do. I've been writing fiction since I was maybe like 6,
Yeah.
probably since I learned how to write.
Right, 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 right.
And I just feel as though fiction writing is an avenue through which I can express my special interests.
Yeah.
Whereas when I would talk about my special interests, or I still talk about my special interests, my autistic special interests,
Right.
people often tell me, "Oh, you're talking too much," or like, "You're too much."
Right.
But no one can stop me from writing a book.
Right.
And in fact, they'll often want to read the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think I've always just felt as though writing fiction is a wonderful place for me to express myself and my interests without facing stigmatizing beliefs or responses from other people. Yeah.
Right, right, right. And when did you like kind of like decide that you want to come out and become an autistic self-advocate? I mean, what led to that moment of that? I mean, it's really brave to be doing this.
Um,
So what kind of like nudged you into it?
so I received my autism diagnosis when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And I actually thought that I might be autistic when I was in like the 8th grade, but there was a lot of misunderstanding, especially back then,
Yeah.
around autistic girls and
Yeah.
autistic girls of color.
Yeah.
So when I received my diagnosis, I did not immediately jump into advocacy work. Like I was figuring myself out. I was thinking through a lot of things. And I think I actually felt a little, if I'm being completely honest, resentful that my diagnosis had been
Yeah.
missed.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that I was able to channel or sublimate that resentment was through sharing the the things that had actually been working for me in a positive way with other people. I felt like, okay, well, sure, I grew up and my diagnosis was missed because I built a lot of negative coping strategies,
Right.
but I also have some positive coping strategies.
Right.
So I thought, why don't I share that with others in case it could be helpful?
Yeah.
And so that's what pushed me into, I guess, like what it is today. But back then it was very small. I was just saying like, here's a tip, here's something that I learned, and sharing that.
Right.
It's really expanded since then.
Yeah. So can I ask you a little bit about, I mean, if it's not personal, what led you to go and like, what nudged you to go get diagnosed and go for testing for autism?
So like I said, I actually wondered about whether or not I could be autistic starting in my middle school experience. And that's because I always felt exceptionally different from my peers. But that really increased after elementary school ended and I went into like 6th grade. So I was around like 11, 12 years old. I just felt really different from my peers and I often felt ill. Like I had migraines and all sorts of problems, and I communicated differently, and I really struggled to make and maintain friends. Nobody was seeming to acknowledge my difference. I think maybe partially because I did well academically, and so people would just overlook that. And I think also because of stereotypes around gender and ethnicity in the United States around like autism often looks like young white boys.
Yeah.
So I was like looking it up and looking into it from that very young age, but I always thought, no, it can't be me because I like fiction, and it says here autistic people don't like fiction, or things like that, stereotypes.
Yeah.
So I then just kind of put that in a box, but I kept going back to that box and being like, but I feel like I might be autistic. And then one day, and so then I thought, well, maybe we'll get better when I go to high school. And nothing changed. And so then I thought, well, maybe I'm just gonna like find myself in college. So I went to college, still the same old song and dance. And then I was like, okay, I just need to get out of this school world, and in the real world, that's what they would say, in the real world, in the workplace, things will be different. I still had the same social communication difficulties, the same sensory issues in the workplace. And at that point I had been misdiagnosed with a few like physical conditions because I was in so much physical pain and chronic fatigue all the time. But then when nothing changed in the workplace, I was like, that's it. Like, there's something going on here. And I was very upset and frustrated. But then I thought to myself, you know what? All this time I've been looking up autism. I wonder if I would see something different if I looked up autism in girls or autism in women. And so I did look that up, and I found at this point, finally, there were some beginnings of information about this on the internet. And it so strongly resonated with me. And I thought, you know, I'm going to seek an evaluation, because then I'll know if it's me, if this is me, or if this is not. And that was really what I wanted to know. I didn't seek an evaluation to confirm that I was autistic. I actually sought an evaluation to know either way, because I was on a journey of trying to understand myself. And so when I got the evaluation and they were like, yes, you are definitely autistic, I was like, oh, okay. And I was able to kind of take another step forward in my life after that.
That's amazing. So can I ask you a little bit more about, what were the friendships that you had? What were those? Were they neurotypicals? Were they, neurodivergent? And just like a little bit more about, your social, emotional life growing up.
So I would say in elementary school, I was the kid that really believed we were friends with everybody in the classroom. So I didn't really have like close friends at that time. And then I was part of a friend group in the 3rd grade. I cannot believe I remember everything. I feel bad for the people. They're like making mistakes in 3rd grade, and I still remember. In the 3rd grade, I remember I was part of this friend group, and we would do gymnastics together. And they were trying to get me to do a gymnastics move that I wasn't comfortable with doing. And they kept saying, well, just try it. And I said, no. And then I said, you're peer pressuring me. And I took it very seriously. I was like, I've been told that if people peer pressure me, they're not real friends. And so then I immediately cut them out of my life. And I feel like that was true, but also it was very, very autistic. Because I was like, there's this rule. You're breaking the rule, and therefore we can never be friends. And after that, I really struggled to make friends. I didn't understand my peers' interests. And I often felt like I was on a different page, like in a different book. I was always interested in something different from others. And so I really struggled to even dress like others. Like I thought I was dressing nice, but it was always like not on trend. Like there was something I was always on a different path. And it's not that I disliked my path, but it was that other people disliked it when I veered off what was supposed to be the typical path. So my peers actually ostracized me quite a bit. And I started to experience bullying beginning in like the 6th grade, where I would actually sometimes be afraid to come to school because people would make fun of me for my stems. They'd make fun of me for my clothes, for my interests. And I actually went to 3 different middle schools not related to bullying.
Mm.
But at every single middle school, I experienced the same thing. So it wasn't necessarily the setting. There was something going on when it comes to, ostracizing and stigmatizing differences. And I don't think that it was really properly
Right.
addressed. I would usually be able to make friends, but I
Yeah.
could only really make friends by pretending to be someone that I wasn't. So masking my differences, camouflaging myself, and pretending to be like a completely different person. I would just mirror what someone I met was doing, and I would just act like them
Yeah.
until they accepted me as a friend. But the problem with that is it's not really mental health
Yeah.
wise or just possible in general to mask a whole personality forever.
Yeah.
So I could make friends pretty quickly, but at some point I would just collapse and I would turn into me. I would
Yeah.
start to be
I,
me,
I,
and then I would lose my friends very,
right.
very quickly.
Right. So can I ask you a follow-up question to this, Lauren? So what would have been different had you not got a diagnosis? Because
Wow.
I live in a country of 1.5 billion, which is India, and I think 90% of the women here or girls here haven't been diagnosed, especially if they're mild to moderate on the autism spectrum. What do you think would have been different about your life had you not got an autism diagnosis when you did?
I think I would have continued along a path of trying to be a completely different person than who I am all the time.
Hmm.
I think that I would have continued to be in a cycle of masking and burning out. And I think I would have honestly, like, I've never been asked this question before, but
Right.
to be very honest with you, like, I think I would have continued to hate myself,
Yeah.
and think that I was inherently broken.
Yeah.
I also think that I would struggle a lot more. I do request
Right.
accommodations
Right.
at my workplaces, and I do explain to my friends and family why I need to take breaks at family functions, why I need to walk away. I think my diagnosis also gave me permission to accommodate myself more
Yeah.
and to become more aware of like the need to honor my sensory and social needs.
Yeah.
I'm still growing in that,
Right.
but
Right.
I mean, and no, I'm I'm not sure who all is watching this, but
Yeah.
to be very honest, I'm not sure I would be
Yeah.
around if I hadn't received my autism
That's
diagnosis. I think I would have
amazing.
been really,
That's
really unwell.
that's
Yeah.
that's beautiful. I'm sorry, but that's thank you for sharing that because
Mhm.
I understand that it almost like probably opened a pathway for you to become yourself. Otherwise, you'd just been trapped inside without
Yeah.
finding a way out. No, I love that. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. So just like talking, like moving a little further, Lauren. I've seen that you're a beautiful dancer, and I dance. Like I'm an Indian, so all Indian girls dance. But like talk a little bit more about how dancing helps you, and how did you see it as like it's like a way of stimming or like a coping or self-soothing strategy and yeah.
Yeah. The first thing I like to say when STEM dancing comes up in these talks with people is that my STEM dancing is actually very different to me from dancing. Like,
Right.
to me, my STEM dancing, it's only called STEM dancing because when people see it, they see
Yeah.
dancing. But for me, I'm actually really just stimming. I know the difference because I know what I'm like when I go out
Yeah. Yeah.
dancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah. Yeah.
know what I'm like when I'm
Right.
stimming.
Right.
And so I definitely like to clarify that from the get-go because I do think that sometimes when people see my videos, especially because it's a reel of me dancing, they're like, "Oh, she's just dancing and she's calling it
Right.
STEM." But it actually is very different for me, stemming and then dancing.
Yeah.
Um, and I have done, I think a lot of people maybe know autistic children or adults who spin and
Yeah.
twirl and toe walk.
Yeah.
I definitely was always a toe walker as a young child. I did not walk on my feet for a really long time. I would always walk on my toes, and I was always spinning and twirling. And I just kept doing that all the time. It was one of my main ways of stimming. It wasn't the only way, but it was one of my main ways. And it just helped me to get this big, I feel like looking back, it helped me to get this big body movement that I really needed in order to process all the things going on in my life all the time, like all around me, sensory wise, and all of that. It was soothing, but also sometimes I wouldn't even know what to do when I was full of like happy feelings and joyful feelings. And I had to like regulate that too through this big body movement. And then one of my other primary ways of stemming is by listening to the same song on repeat. And I think people have maybe seen videos or they know autistic people in their lives who like listen to something on loop, on loop, on loop. And so I usually do that with a song. Not just for a day, like I'll listen to the same song sometimes for months.
Yeah.
And it's very soothing. So for me, when I am what people call stem dancing, I'm actually stemming with that big body movement and also stemming by listening to the same song on repeat. And so that's what that really is for me. And it helps me, it just, I mean, it helps me to regulate in the same way that, you know, shaking hands and rocking back and forth helps. I also like tap my chest and I tap my fingers all the time. This really helps me to process spoken words. And just all these different things. But the stem dancing, it's the biggest, I think it's the biggest stem that I probably do. And that means that it helps me the most well, I guess. Like this can only get me so far. When I am doing a full big movement, I can process things, I think, a lot more. And I think that's something people don't really want to hear about autistic individuals. They want us to have small stems or quiet stems or subtle stems because it makes other people comfortable. And so I feel like, okay, well, me tapping my chest is just, it's only going to get me so far. But if you let me move, if you let me actually move, then maybe I can actually remain in a space for longer or process a conversation later better. I guess that's how it at least feels for me.
Right. Tell me, have you ever had like non-autistic neurotypical people say stuff like, I do this too, but I'm not autistic, or I'm like this too? Like, do you get that a lot, and how do you kind of answer some of that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I hear they're like everybody's a little autistic rhetoric, for sure. And I think it's the same. I like to, when I hear that, I just think about it the same way as there is anxiety and then there are anxiety conditions. So like there's always like going to be levels of relating. There is having a food allergy and then there's having food that you don't like, right? So like everybody's going to be a little bit similar. And there's people who, for example, absolutely live their entire lives for art. And then there are people who like to make art as a hobby, right? So there's always going to be a small level of relating to one another's experiences. So when people tell me, oh, I do that too, I just try to say like, oh, I'm glad that you're trying to find a way to relate. But remember that I actually have a disability. And so it is a little different. Now, there are sometimes people who are like, I do all of these things too. Do you think I'm autistic? And I'll be like, I don't know. If you're really, really wondering, then like look into it more. And I just keep looking into it. But I'm not going to be able to tell someone whether or not they're autistic.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So just like talking a little bit more about, I mean, back when I studied autism and when I've been in the field of autism is really like misrepresented in books and in movies and in TV shows. And, you see the good doctor and you see a certain style of autism, or you see love on the spectrum. What are some of your thoughts? Because like when people meet some of the high functioning autistic kids that I work with, they're like, like why are you guys spending time working with these kids? There's so many other kids who are in more need. And so how do you like, what are some of your thoughts on, how autism is represented in the media?
Well, I definitely think that, oh, there's so much in what you just said. So I'm like, kind of like reeling a little bit. I think that all all people who have a disability, right, they need supports just in different ways. And of course, I do want to see those who need, like day-to-day living care supports to receive the supports and accommodations that they need. And also autistic individuals who are speaking and perhaps more able to take care of their daily needs. Yes, we can walk through life, and people might not always, quote unquote, notice our autism, but that doesn't in the same way demonstrate or showcase the actual needs that we have going on within ourselves as well. And so to anyone who is thinking that autistic individuals who are speaking and maybe able to hold jobs sometimes or go to school and inclusive environments and mainstream environments, that we don't need support, I think maybe they just need to take some time to look at what autistic burnout is, and also to look at the quality of life surveys for autistic individuals who are perceived as high functioning, because it tells a very different story than what someone sees on the surface right away. But in terms of representation in the media, I think that there's two pathways I wish I could see happening. One, I think, of course, I wish I could see autistic individuals who are like me actually represented in the media, people of color, as well as autistic women, and represented in ways outside of they're a savant, a super smart scientist, or some kind of forensic analysis person. I would like to see more diverse representation in that way. And I would also like to see representation of non-speaking and high support needs autistic individuals that are authentic as well. I think that the folks who are often those like folks on that in that realm of the spectrum are often misrepresented, even if they are maybe sometimes represented more in media. I think that they are often more grossly misrepresented and infantilized. And so I would like to see better representation for all autistic folks across the spectrum. Yeah. And that would entail then including autistic people in those conversations. I think a lot of the time these representations are made by consulting with everyone except autistic people themselves. So in writing those characters, I think a lot of research and a lot of conversations have to happen, and people really ought to consider whether or not someone's autism needs to be like a plot device in a story. Instead of someone being autistic in a story, they make the autism the plot. And I think that kind of also sets autistic representation up to be viewed as a tragedy or a like inspiration story only.
Yeah. No, for sure. I have so many thoughts on this. We could just have like a whole new conversation about it. But yeah, 100%. Yeah. I also think like autism is a good thing to pull into a script because they can they can sharpen certain things about an autistic person and showcase that well, and that will give their storyline a little bit of an edge as compared to just like somebody who's on the spectrum and talking like you and doing stuff like you and dancing to kind of like calm themselves down. Like that might just feel like too boring for like an interesting story that someone wants to make with someone on the spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of just letting people on the spectrum just be characters in the story, it has to be part of the plot. So then it has to be dramatic. And in my third novel, Streamline, that was the first of my novels where I actually named that the protagonist is autistic. And I remembered like having to kind of think through this myself and be like, okay, well, how is her autism going to play into the story? And I didn't want to make it seem like La La Land, where like being autistic was just never going to be a thing in the story. But I think what really comes down to is like, okay, this character has hopes, dreams, fears, and like a family, friends, like their own personality. And if an autistic character in the media doesn't have those things, then they might be a poor
That's it.
representation
That's
of
it.
an autistic individual.
That's it. Like we be like sensationalizing things a little bit across
Mhm.
mainstream
Yeah.
and films and all. So I have like a little bit of a bender of a question, but tell me how, like, did the diagnosis of autism help you kind of like like did it like also free you into learning more and doing more and creating more? Was it like kind of like an opening gate for you to just like unleash your intelligence and your creativity and your passions? I don't know, like I'm just imagining, once someone gives you this the certificate that you actually have the diagnosis of autism, you're more unleashed in the world. Did something like that happen?
I mean, I guess it definitely something like that did sort of happen in that prior to my official diagnosis, I don't think that I felt as much permission to really look into all things autism as it relates to me. I feel like before that, I was learning about autism and wondering if I was a part of that.
Right.
And then once I received my official diagnosis, then I was like, oh, this is me. So maybe there was like a little bit more self-interest
Yeah.
that went into it. So I went into reading more books and sharing more of my experiences with less abandon, I guess. Or is it more without abandon? Yeah, with less abandon. So I
Right.
just kind of like was like, well, here we go. And
Right.
I was maybe more interested in it because it no longer became learning about autism, it became
Yeah.
learning about me. And so maybe there was a little bit more self-interest
Right.
fueling it.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. So just like thinking a little big picture. I know we're already at 32 minutes. Thinking a little big picture. So I mean, India is a few decades behind when it comes to autism and inclusion, and what are we doing to like raise young people on the autism spectrum. But what do you think the United States could do better in the space? Where do you think you guys still fall short? I mean, I'm sure there's a long
We're
list that
working on
goes
a
with
lot
it.
of things here
I
in the
know, I
US.
know, I know.
And I definitely don't think that the US as a country is like the leader in
Yeah,
autism support and
yeah,
understanding.
yeah,
And I think even in the US, because US is very big and we have like so many cultures within our culture. I think we're at different places depending on different communities and
right,
different like spaces geographically as well. I think that we really need to still work on, in a lot of ways, we still need to work on autism awareness of what autism can actually look like that it doesn't even have a look, of what autism, the experience of autistic people are, across lines of difference, across different ethnicities within the United States, because autism is a social communication disability in a lot of
right,
ways. So that's going to express itself very differently depending on a person's home culture.
yeah,
So I don't think that people really have a very good understanding of that.
yeah,
And I do think that in general, the United States, and I come from a very educational
right,
standpoint, we really do need to just like work on our education system in general. And so that's really impacting autistic folks. Our classrooms are just so sensorially unsafe. Our
yeah,
schools are just so sensorially unsafe. The
right,
fluorescent lights, the sounds,
yeah,
all of these things, like we have so far to go. And then I'm not kidding you when I tell you that just asking a school to turn off the fluorescent lights and put lamps in is one of the hardest battles you could ever fight. They're
right,
like, why?
right,
Why?
right,
It doesn't,
right,
there's just
right,
so much
right.
hesitancy
Resistance to,
to
yeah,
change
yeah,
in that sphere. And it benefits all children to have a sensorially safe environment. And of course, there are spaces and there are educators and there are schools who are prioritizing that,
yeah,
even if not from an inclusion standpoint, just from an aesthetic
right,
one. But like there's so much that needs to be done, I think, in that way. There's such a fix it mentality.
yeah,
We're going to fix the autistic individual and make them less
yeah,
autistic. And I think we have a long way to go, although we are making gains. I will say, even in the last like 5 years, I've seen education narrative shifting and people saying less of like, okay, we need to like help them to not be as autistic and instead being
Yeah.
like, we
Yeah.
want to try to help them to feel proud or comfortable being autistic. And like, that's a huge shift,
Yeah.
but we have a ways to
Yeah.
go.
I
Mhm.
I mean, we like to see the world in black and white. I think people just struggle with seeing the gray of, yes, this might be great for you, but it might not be great for three people in this room. So how do we work around
Mhm.
that? Like I think they just don't get the minority mentality sometimes.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
mindset just takes such a long time to change.
Mhm.
Today I was working with my team on just like the status quo of things and how do we kind of like break out of that. Somebody is just commenting, "Are you both sisters?" I mean, I think like that's the space of autism where so many of the high schoolers that I used to work with, they could almost like pass off as my children because I would sit back with them. I mean, stay back till 10 p.m. working on their homework projects.
Mhm.
So just like the last few questions, but how has it been hard being a woman on the spectrum, being queer, figuring out like your journey through all of these, non-stereotypical ways of being? Like what
Mhm.
have been some of your biggest struggles?
Okay, so I'll say one thing is that like being a Black, multiracial, queer woman who
Right.
is autistic, really honestly, I think it also was one of the things that caused me to, one, not only not have educators and family recognize that I could be autistic, but also too, it made me not think I was autistic and always think, well, maybe I don't fit in because I'm
Yeah.
Black and because I'm multiracial, or maybe I don't fit in because I'm queer. And a lot of people, I think, assumed that too, like, oh, well, her struggles are just because she's queer.
Yeah.
But like, and so I think that needs to be looked into more, like all of these intersections and how that can lead to misunderstanding and misdiagnosis.
Yeah.
But also, I think that it's it's such the reality of autism. Like autism is something that exists with all people, and many autistic people are not going to ascribe to the social constructs that other people take for granted. So, like, many autistic people will be more likely to recognize and identify as queer because there's a lot less of the like social, like, I can't be queer because people say that I can't be queer because being queer is something that's not socially acceptable, but it's like I'm already kind of operating outside of the socially acceptable. So I think that a lot of autistic people are going to just like bypass maybe some of those social stigmas within themselves
Right.
around being queer.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people think autistic people are more likely to be queer because maybe something is like wrong with us, which is terrible
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's part of our strengths in that we recognize the weakness of some of these social constructs and are much more able to like just skip over that and recognize parts of our identity. Now, whether or not we're actually given space to do so is a completely different story.
Yeah.
I also think that a lot of like LGBTQ communities are not very sensory safe.
Yeah.
It can be very loud and glittery and colorful, which is fun.
Yeah.
But that can also then lead to autistic people feeling maybe less welcome in LGBTQ environments. And then within the on the like ethnicity side of things, I think being Black and autistic, Black multiracial and autistic people sometimes just I think are less likely to believe Black folks
Yeah.
when they are autistic because they assume that there's some kind of behavior disorder or something. A lot of stereotypes around Black individuals can also affect the safety of Black individuals when stimming, and there's so much going
Right.
on there.
Right. Right.
Um, and then lastly, being a woman, this is changing, but in the past, there was just like a belief that girls like couldn't be autistic because autism manifests oftentimes very differently in us. And I'm glad that that landscape is changing. And I definitely think that that impacted my ability to access diagnosis early as well. But now, honestly, all of these things, speaking about them in silos sometimes feels strange because all of those things make up who I am equally
Yeah.
and all together. So I can't really see my autism separate from any other part of myself, even if other people look at me and try to separate those things.
No, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. So one last question before I just like open up to questions and anything else you want to share. But my last question is, how hard is it to get the accommodations you need at workspaces, at social spaces? I mean, do people get it? I'm just curious. And what kind of accommodations would you usually ask for?
So receiving accommodations is, I think, very difficult because in the United States, accommodations have to be reasonable, and reasonable is in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
And usually it's those in power get to determine what is reasonable, and those in power are not the ones who share my disability oftentimes. So it can be difficult to access accommodations.
Right.
I tend to prioritize in terms of accessing accommodations. I try to prioritize sensory accommodations because if I am overloaded sensory wise, I'm not able to adequately access my other coping strategies.
Right.
Like I can't lean into my other coping strategies if I am in sensory pain. Like it's just not going to happen. I consider sensory to be the foundation for everything.
Right.
So I do prioritize accommodations around lighting, around sound, um, and around visual overstimulation, like colors, posters, like just too many things going on. Those are probably my number one priorities. However, I do request or like express a higher need for clear communication.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, oftentimes, a lot of the time, non-autistic people speak between the lines and then expect me to understand something, and I'm just like not going to get it. Like I do truly need things to be stated very clearly.
Right.
And another accommodation that this is very, very, very particular,
Yeah.
but it's so huge for me, and I'm sure there are many other autistic individuals who would agree with this.
Yeah.
I always request the accommodation of being given the benefit of the doubt when I ask a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when I ask questions because I'm confused, people take it as a personal attack. And so that I'm not able to access the information that I need because I'm not able to ask questions without being perceived as being confrontational.
Right.
And so and I also ask that people answer my question as I've asked it. So if I ask a question, answer my question. Don't talk around my question. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It will be so like I will get so overloaded and upset. And it's very upsetting for me. And then it becomes upsetting for the other person. However, I do think it needs to be named that an accommodation that I'm not requesting is, for example, like alternative forms of communication. I do think that email and things like that have just gotten so common that I'm able to just lean into that avenue very easily without requesting. But I think a lot of folks, a lot of autistic folks do need, especially in different workplace environments, like if you work in the service industry, people to be more open to communicating outside of speech. And I don't think that that accommodation request is often honored or even feels accessible to make, which is absolutely ridiculous given our current technological landscape. So I think we really need people to be more understanding of AAC, be it tech or non-tech, and embracing it.
No, I love everything that you've shared, because as somebody who's worked with lots of kids on the spectrum of autism, I fully, like, if I don't feel like I'm understanding what I'm saying, I can't expect them to. So yeah, so clarity, accommodations, listening, it all just becomes so important. Anything else, that you'd want to share in the space of, there have been so many questions already, which we can open this up for anybody who wants to ask anything. But anything else you want to kind of share about the space of autism, your journey, what you want to do, in the space of self-advocacy, as an autistic queer woman?
Uh, well, I think that there's always so much more that can be said, and I think it can be difficult to pin down anything in like a quick amount of time.
Right.
But I do just want to say, probably because a lot of people in here think about from the educational standpoint, one thing that I do always want to say, and I don't think this is said enough, is that, and then we kind of started talking about AAC or like alternative forms of communication. I'll just say that easily, is that AAC and helping students to access alternative forms of communication, it's not going to hamper their communication skills. I think I hear that all the time. People saying like, oh, well, we don't want to teach them how to use AAC, or we don't want to lean into that because maybe then they'll stop talking and we don't want them to stop talking. And that always very much upsets me, but also shows me still like this pervasive mindset that talking is like the number one form of communication, as though there aren't communities that also like just like sign language doesn't already exist and people like have ways of communicating all the time without speaking. And then we're also more and more communicating online, and yet there are young children who would greatly benefit from AAC who are being denied AAC until a later age out of like a fear that they will never talk because they got to learn communication skills through AAC. I just want to say very clearly, like, it will translate. Do not withhold AAC from a child who needs it out of a fear that they won't talk. It seems like a logical idea that giving a child an AAC tool would prevent them from talking, but it's not actually. Like, it's a fear-based thought. And so I just want to say that really clearly, even if it doesn't exactly impact me, I see it impacting my community so much. And so, yeah, that's something I want to bring up. I don't know if you have anything you'd like me to also bring up, but I just like to mention that.
Yeah. No, that's so like that's a hot debated topic even in India. So I'm glad you brought that up. Anything else? Anybody else wants to ask, share? There's somebody who said who also wants to come tell their story. Any questions before we close out?
There's a delay on Instagram Live, so even if they do have a question, we won't see it for a little bit of time. But yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit more too, just around like interest, because we did talk about writing and like how I like to express my interest through writing. So I guess I would like to share as well, like, I know that sometimes there's thinking that special interests are only restrictive, that they'll prevent autistic people from being able to like access communicating with others or conversations with others or learning new things. But it's truly, I feel like a lot of autistic individuals learn through their interests. So I do hope that people will allow or permit. I mean, honestly, I think it is a place where we're permitting autistic people to express their interests, and I that makes me sad. But there is that power dynamic. So please, like, let those interests shine out. I know anytime someone connects with me over my interest, it's wonderful. And I know sometimes there's fear. Oh, well, maybe it's inappropriate, the interest or this or that. But giving space for it can make a huge difference. There will always be like those stories that people prop up, like, oh, well, this interest was just absolutely awful, or this autistic person became obsessed with this thing that destroyed their life. Those stories, once again, are fear-based and rare. So if your child loves, if a child or an adult loves dolls, loves horses, loves worms, loves trains, or loves fairies, just let that love shine through and let there be artistic joy. And use that to introduce us to new things. There are things I would have never done. Concerts that I've gone to, travels that I've taken, people that I've talked to, in environments that I would have found completely overloading and unsuitable for me, that I was able to access because I loved my interest. And it helped me to do that. So yeah, the power of interest is truly really strong.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like a great tool even for educators and to get into the world of autism. Anything else? What kind of a school did you study in? Was it just like a public city school?
I'll answer that, but I'm gonna just tell. A Carnal Medium asked, how long do you usually spend on your special interest per day? And so on some days I'm not permitted as much time as others, which usually does lead to like some mental health fallout. But I think I don't really put a timer on it, but I wake up very early in the morning, so I can usually have at least like 1 hour with my interests before I even start my day. And then I'm constantly thinking about my interests. I'll play music that allows me to engage with my interests in my mind, reading books around my interests, and after work, once again, like listening to music, watching videos. I would say a few hours a day on a good day, the whole day,
Wow.
right? Like that's the best.
Yeah.
But I can spend the whole day around it. But and it's not just like a hobby, like it's like actually a need. It really helps me to regulate.
Okay.
But to answer your question, I went to public school
Okay.
the
Amazing.
whole time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you didn't have any extra support, or did you visit a counselor there? Um,
So I remember when I was in early elementary school, my main stem was sucking my fingers.
right.
And I remember, even though I didn't have an IEP or anything, that I was given like special permission to chew gum in class because they were trying to help me break the habit
Right.
of my stem, which, by the way, I did not stop sucking my fingers until the
Wow.
6th grade. So anything they did not work. But I was very happy to keep stemming. But I did not receive an IEP or any accommodations in school, but I did know a few teachers that recognized my differences and were very, very supportive behind the scenes. And I don't think that I would have really been as successful in school without the kind intervention of those teachers.
That's amazing.
I will also say I did receive an accommodation because I was in gifted and talented.
Yeah.
And that probably also helped me to be less bored in class, which would have led to some behavior issues, I imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really did struggle a lot in school, though, with social things. So the classroom and when the teachers were giving lessons, like that was my safe haven because it was structured
Right.
and because people couldn't really do anything to me during that time. So, but the hallways, lunchtime, all those things, I really wish I could have had access to like a structured lunch club, things like that, I think would have made a huge difference. And what happens to someone in that time? I'm grown. I'm doing very well, but I'll be honest, I don't forget. I don't forget what happened to me socially during those times. They really did teach me a lot about how non-autistic people perceive differences and how hurtful that can become.
Right.
Um, and that's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, because I don't want that to happen in the same way for future generations of autistic people. And any small change that we can make a huge difference for, even if it's just for one autistic person.
Right.
That would mean the world to me, to be honest.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this. And I know that the people in India speak English really well. So when they're going to listen to this, they're going to understand this. And it's just going to help thousands of people who might view this on Instagram. So thank you so much for doing this. Good luck with your book. I'm going to read some of your books that I haven't read until now, but thank you for sharing, and thank you for telling your story, and just like being so clear and so easy to chat with. You really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and happy Autism Month.
Autism Month. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye. Take care.
Bye.